by the Gordon family to participate in today's celebration and look forward to sharing and hearing stories about Stephen's life and how he impacted us all. My name is Heather Munoz, and I'm a longtime colleague of Stephen, Mike, and Anna's at Appfolio. I'm so thankful to have had the opportunity to work so closely with Steve these last few years and to have formed such a great friendship along the way. Today we will celebrate and honor Steve. We will laugh, we will cry, we will share our favorite memories of him and all of the special and hilarious things he did that I can only describe as Steve-isms. Steve worked at Appfolio for over 9 years and was truly a pillar at the company. He worked in our Santa Barbara and Dallas offices. He worked for our sales and client services departments, and he worked hand in hand with nearly every group in his most recent role leading our key account onboarding team. Stephen was very opinionated and not afraid to speak up or challenge others, but always in a caring way. He was knowledgeable and passionate about his work, his team members, his colleagues, and our customers. He was an excellent leader, and his team always had the best things to say about working for him. So many connections and friendships have been formed over the past 9 years, and so many people were devastated by the loss of our dear Stephen last week. As we begin grieving together, we find ourselves going back and forth between tears and laughs as we reflect on our memories of Steve and all of the hilarious things he did. In addition to his deep roots and long-lasting friendships with many of you in attendance today. Stephen was a very social guy. He held incredibly lengthy political debates on Facebook. He commonly posted Instagram photos of his own tweets. And he couldn't resist Snapchatting his car stereo playing his favorite songs. At the office, he was known for lurking around, waiting for you to free up so he could share his latest idea, loitering in other teams' areas, striking up non-work conversations, and going on and on and on in team stand-ups or meetings. Once you got Stephen talking, it was hard to stop. Like the time that he was asked to be featured in the Humans of Appfolio podcast, and the typical 1-hour segment turned into multiple recording sessions and over 3 hours of content because he had so much to say and he was so easy to talk with. Outside the office, he was there to help you celebrate your birthday, always down to go see a movie, or even take a road trip to go to a concert, sporting event, or comedy show. Stephen could talk about anything, from the deep to the trivial. The important thing for him was connecting with you and spending time together. Stephen was an incredibly funny guy. He was always telling jokes and making everyone laugh. If he found something funny, he couldn't let it go. He'd get so stuck on something, like laughing for an hour and a half straight about how bad the car smelled on the way back from a concert in LA. And when he laughed, his entire body laughed with him, and you couldn't help but laugh too. He did silly things, like set up Slack-bot auto-response messages, so when someone typed his name, it would auto-respond with, "You mean Supreme Leader Gordon?" He proudly wore beard ornaments to the office during the holidays. He put the orchid that came on his dinner plate behind his ear so he looked fancy. Steve was the ultimate troll, and he had a dark sense of humor. He had just recently moved back from Dallas to Santa Barbara, and someone in the office had made a comment about having a child. Stephen overheard it and thought it would be really funny, so he made the comment in front of his team, "I had a kid, but I'm not in their life."
No, man.
He never said it was a joke, and some people actually believed him. Seeing that some people had fallen for his sick joke, Stephen thought it would be hilarious to keep it alive. He would periodically make plans with the people that knew it wasn't real about how he could slyly bring it up. One time, he came up with the idea to add time on his calendar for a paternity test. He then told one of his team members to find some time on his calendar to meet on that day, so they'd intentionally see this supposed paternity test they had to take. One of the poor gals that had fallen for Stephen's sick joke was especially sad to hear of Steve's passing, asking, "Doesn't he have a kid too?" Oh, how we all wish this was just one of Stephen's sick jokes he was playing on us. Stephen was a big old teddy bear. He was fuzzy. he was genuine, he was kind. He loved to hug and gave the best ones. His hugs would completely consume you, and you could feel how genuine and loving he was from the hug he'd give you in passing on a random Tuesday. He was thoughtful. When he thought about something, he was sure to share it with you to make you feel special. Stephen always wanted everyone to feel included, never left out. My favorite memory of Stephen was probably when he met my 4-week-old daughter, Mackenzie. I was on maternity leave and surprised the entire Folio Services leadership team by showing up with the baby and my husband at a team dinner at the Harbor Restaurant. Stephen was so happy to see us and meet her, and was insistent on being one of the few people to hold our little girl that evening. I'm not going to lie, I was a bit nervous for him to do so. I know he was as well.
Aww.
But it made him so happy, and I could see how much he instantly loved her. I'll never forget the smile on his face as he proudly and awkwardly held her tiny little body with those huge paws of his. Stephen was also selfless. He'd do anything for you. He was a thinker, always thinking bigger. He was relentless. Once he got excited about something, he would grab on and not let go until it was accomplished. He was corny, wishing we were all laughing right now. He was unique in all the best ways. Stephen loved music. I'm sure his love of music dates back to even before he played the bass drum on the drum line here at Dos Pueblos High School. You could talk to Stephen about any genre of music. He seemed to know every artist or type of music, and if for some rare reason he didn't, he was so excited to check it out. He'd make Spotify playlists and share them with friends and colleagues. He wrote and recorded rap songs about the hard-knock life of an Folio onboarder. And karaoke, oh how Steve loved to karaoke. We could always count on him to make several appearances on the mic at karaoke night. My favorite was the recurring Forgot About Dre rap duet with Caitlin Eminem Surratt, where in true fashion, it was inevitable that Stephen would get so excited and take over the whole song, not just his part. Stephen loved sports. He was an avid football fan and proudly donned his many Manchester City jerseys. He loved golfing with his buddies at Hidden Oaks or Sandpiper. He always made sure the Olympics or the World Cup games were televised in the office. He went to various sporting events across the U.S., and when visiting Dallas, he took his team to go bowling and then complained the whole time because he didn't have his own bowling shoes with him. Stephen was very competitive, and by competitive, I mean that he hated losing. If Stephen won, everyone knew, and if he didn't win, there was always a reason for it.
Yep.
Stephen once lost in fantasy football, and as a result was forced to wear a puka shell necklace. He wore that necklace for so long that many considered that he thought of it as an award rather than a punishment. My guess is that Steve probably looked at it as a prize because he didn't want to admit defeat. Stephen also loved camping and true crime. He loved talking about TV shows he'd seen, the latest investment he'd made, and how proud he was with that Folio stock price. He was also proud when he had a fresh haircut and would stand a little taller that day in his plaid button-up collared shirt or favorite Folio tee. I've been thinking of Stephen nonstop since I heard of his passing, and I truly believe the little signs I've been seeing, hearing, and experiencing are him looking down and trying to make me feel better through this sad time. From the songs played on the radio, to the visits in my dreams, to the old-fashioned that was randomly comped last Saturday night when out to dinner, I felt Steve's presence, and it drew me up here on stage to share with all of you. I miss you like crazy, my friend, my work brother. I'll miss giving you advice, like when it was time for a haircut or to trim your overgrown beard. I'll miss you casually stopping by the lunch table to chat. I'll miss you frequently walking by my office to see if I was free to talk. I'll miss coaching you to be more concise in your delivery because we know how Steve could talk and talk and talk. Things simply won't be the same without you, but our memories of you will carry on in our minds and in our hearts. I'd now like to welcome some of Stephen's childhood friends to come up and share some memories of Steve.
So we all thought it'd be fitting, since all of us basically did everything together, to also do the speech together. So we're all going to stand up here today, but some of us are going to give speeches, some of us aren't, but we all love Stephen, did everything together, so we're going to do it together now. So, my name's Joe, or Joey, as many of my friends know me. I apologize in advance because many of you know our friend as Stephen Gordon, but for those of us that grew up with Stephen, we knew him as Stevie G, Gordy, Gord Dog, Gordon, or when he would infamously bust a freestyle rap, Stevie Ma, F and G. But I will always remember that day I got a phone call stating Stephen had passed away. And for a minute, my brain wouldn't really understand the information that was being processed. And I just remember driving, my whole world kind of stopped. Everything kind of just shut down. Earmuff's wife, I was driving at this time, yes. But it just didn't seem real. But then later that night, I started really thinking and remembering and reflecting on our friendship, and started to think about all the memories we had. The good memories, the bad memories, the memories that I want to forget. But they were memories. And my mind kind of turned into a slideshow of just Gordon clips that just kept playing over and over and over and over again. And although I was sad, it was really warming for my heart. I remember the first time I met this kid from the East Coast talking about the New York Knicks. He became this crazy new kid who would give up his Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant cards for Patrick Ewing and John Stark cards. Pretty sure me, Tommy, and David sought him out immediately and started trading instantly as well. You know, we were talking about basketball. That's kind of what bonded us when we first met. I never met a kid from the East Coast, so he thought he was pretty cool being able to say he was from the East Coast during the Biggie and Tupac wars. And then I'm also pretty sure we bonded because at that time we were probably both the two pudgy fifth graders in the class, so we were able to connect on that level as well. The difference is he was probably 4'6" and I was still 5'22", so we were able to connect at that time though. But for some reason, even though I became friends later, like really good friends later with Steve, probably high school, elementary is what stuck in my mind. There are a lot of people in this room right now that went to elementary with Gordon. We're like family. We are family. We call ourselves an MBC crew, Mountain View Elementary crew. We used to say it at parties. We used to say it at Laker games. We used to say it randomly driving around State Street. It doesn't matter. We were always MBC crew. And I was sitting back and thinking about this Dr. Seuss play that we did. I honestly don't remember if it was 5th or 6th grade, but Gordon was Horton the elephant. And he was standing on this 10-foot ladder, flapping his little elephant wings. And he was starting to say, you know, Horton the elephant up in the tree. And my buddy's actually here with me now. Me and my buddy Rick were the hunters hunting him. And we had these rifles, and you know, we're aiming at him, and we're going pew, 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 pew. And during practice, he kept looking at me and Rick and saying, "You can't point those at people. You can't point those at me. You can't point those at me." And we thought it was funny. So literally during the play, we're like pew, 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 and we were telling him to get mad. So it was actually pretty funny. But funny enough, Horton was a perfect character for Gordon. The story goes, Horton the elephant, who's tricked into sitting on a bird's egg while the mom went on a permanent vacation. Horton endures a number of hardships along the way, but persists, often saying, "I meant what I said, and I said what I meant, an elephant's faithful 100%. The faithful 100% is what came to mind. Gordon was truly a faithful friend, faithful co-worker, brother, and son, as faithful as they come. He knew exactly what the right words to say and when to say them to make you feel like you were the most special person in the world, but he also knew the right words to say and when to say them to ruffle your elephant feathers. But that's who Gordon was. He was 100% authentic. He took pride in making people around him feel good about themselves, and he meant it. The countless stories I've heard so far of how he did that for others is truly, truly Gordon. My last gem of Gordon comes from about 3 weeks ago. I'm not going to get into what we talked about, but he was with my mom, and they were talking, and they talked about me a little bit. They talked about my wife, and listening to him and the words of pure love he had for me and expressing it to my mom will forever be in my heart. One of the takeaways I got from this today, from this tragic time in my life, is that I have to celebrate life every day. I have to celebrate it whether it's a birthday or someone passes. I want and I'm going to celebrate life every day. My condolences to the Gordon family, his lovely parents, my bro, his baby bro, his sister-in-law, and to all his family. And one more thing, I'm up here for all his boys. We're brother in arms, and we love you, Stevie G, Gordon, Gord Dog, MVC for life. Thank you.
My name's David, by the way. I look around me today and I see a room full of people who love Steve. Steve was so unique and unforgettable. Even if you only met him once, he was the kind of guy who would leave an imprint on you forever. Steve was genuine and honest and real with everything he had to say, and oftentimes didn't care if his opinion was going to piss you off. I think he actually enjoyed that quite a bit. Steve was so intelligent that he could have a conversation with anyone about pretty much any topic. He knew how to connect and engage with people, even if you didn't agree with them. Steve could argue with you until you were both blue in the face, and he could make you laugh until you couldn't open your eyes to the tears. One of my favorite things about Steve is that he loved being around his friends and hated missing anything. He actually invented FOMO. Let's fear of missing out. One year in college, he spent $700 last minute to fly from the East Coast to Santa Barbara just to celebrate Tommy's birthday. When Steve wanted to see a concert or comedy show, he would always buy extra tickets for friends without even asking us if we wanted to go, almost as if he had a fear of his friends missing out too. Last year, he bought me tickets to 2 different comedy shows with comedians I had never heard of before. Anthony Jeselnik and Tom Segura, because Steve was certain I would love them. To this day, those are 2 of the best shows I've ever seen. It's moments and memories like this that show us that Steve actually and truly saw his friends. He was like our concierge for so many things in life, introducing us to new foreign foods, weird bands nobody's ever heard of, movies and TV shows that weren't in the mainstream, and even outlandish board games that would result in a lot of overexcitement and yelling. He knew what his friends would love even before we knew it ourselves. When I think about Steve now, I think of the hundreds of little moments that he made me laugh even without trying. Whether it be wearing the same jersey for a week straight, rapping every lyric to every song that came on the radio, or starting over when he messed up, or just hearing him angrily yell his favorite word, fuck. Anything went wrong. We especially heard that word a lot on the golf course. Steve could find humor in anything. Literally anything. Sometimes to a fault. I'm going to miss getting those texts from him in the middle of the day, making sure to open the message when nobody was around, due to the likely vulgarity and offensiveness of the content. Many of you know exactly what I'm talking about. I'd either cringe, laugh out loud, or be completely confused. Yet no matter how ridiculous his last meme or message was that he sent us, I couldn't wait to see what he was going to send us next. There are so many of us who love Steve, and it's clear that he didn't shy away from who he was with anyone. If Steve had something to say, he was going to say it, whether you agreed with him or not. Through conversation, he sparked curiosity, empathy, anger, laughter, and he always made you think. Steve was truly one of a kind and completely irreplaceable. Steve was all about making memories, and it's evident after hearing so many stories from the multitudes of people this week that Steve made lasting memories with everybody here. I might not ever be on the same level as FOMO as Steve was, but because of him, I know that every moment matters. And Steve was an amazing friend. I love you, Steve. I miss you so much, and I'm truly lucky and grateful that you shared your big heart and your laughter with me.
My name is Tommy, and I've known Steve since elementary school. I think we really became friends in 7th grade. We had second period PE together. We both hated it. We mostly hated it because we didn't want to get sweaty first thing in the morning and walk around school the rest of the day. Our lockers were right next to each other, and we'd come up with a plan of how we were going to skip out on running the mile. Typically it involved walking or hiding behind a vending machine. My favorite part about this memory was Steve's shoes. In typical Steve fashion, he had the best, most expensive running shoes. Not only did Steve have the best, he also knew the best way to do things. We went out to eat a lot, and he always had the best way of ordering food. He worked at Pickup Sticks in high school. I love that Steve had that job. He would custom order everything for me, and then either not charge me or charge a very minimal amount. Even after he quit Pickup Sticks, maybe he got fired from giving out too much food. But even after he didn't work there, we would go and order, and they would tell him, "No, you can't order that." And he would tell them, "Yes, I can." And he would then tell them exactly what to go tell the cook, and our food would come out perfectly. Steve's knowledge was very deep. I was always in awe, and still am in awe, of how much Steve knew about so many different things. We attended a city college econ class together. Steve didn't even buy the textbook. He wouldn't study at all, but he knew every answer. I would study and ask questions, and even without hesitating, he would know the answer. He had a very special way of retaining information, and it was really incredible. Steve could watch a documentary and remember the whole thing. He could watch a show and tell you the most detailed part of the show. He could listen to music and then recite every line from the song. He just had an amazing ability to retain information. I think this made him very relatable to a wider range of people. He could talk to anyone about anything because he knew a lot about whatever anyone was into. Steve loved talking. Deep conversations that really made you think. I'm really going to miss those. We had so many hours together, especially in the car. Road trips to San Diego, Arizona, frequent casino trips, day trips to different restaurants out of town. We just had so many hours of meaningful conversation. Steve was a bud to me, and I'm really going to miss him. Recently, Steve had moved in with my wife and I. His lease was coming up. We had an extra room. I told him if he wanted, he could move in with us. Our place isn't huge, probably 1,200 square feet. When Steve moved in, I was going out of my way to clean, to make sure he knew we kept things clean. I'd seen his younger years of living with Dave, and they had a trash room, and I didn't want them to repeat that. Steve saw us cleaning and immediately went out and bought a Roomba, a vacuum robot vacuum. He came home from work one day really excited to tell us of this purchase. I told him he was crazy and asked, "Why did you buy that? The house isn't very big, it takes less than 10 minutes to clean." His response was now, "You won't have to do it." I couldn't do anything but laugh and be scared of what he spent on the Roomba. The Roomba came, and in typical Steve fashion, it was the best. It didn't have a camera on it. Having Steve live with us the past month really brightened up our household. We had been having a rough month or two, and he just injected life back into our house. We were doing things every day. Tennis with my mom, where he'd hit the ball as hard as he could, and I had to remind him of playing with my mom. He'd swing the racket and then miss the ball and look at my mom and ask her, "Why did you give me the bad racket?" We were golfing, going to the gym. He had us watching TV shows, grocery shopping, which I hate, and somehow he made fun. And my most favorite are ice cream trips. He was just a lot of fun to be around, and I'm going to miss him. Thank you.
Hello everyone. I wasn't planning on doing a speech, but couldn't find a way of sleeping last night, so I just wrote one anyways. So here we go. Hello and good afternoon. I want to express my gratitude to everyone that's taken the time to spend this beautiful day celebrating such a special soul. I appreciate you all, and it's been a pleasure meeting many of you for the first time. I would also like to give a special thank you to Steve's immediate family. His younger brother Michael has always been inspiration to me, and I feel like I watched him growing up quicker than Steve and I, even though he's younger. And it's been a pleasure to watch you Steve's parents are amazing. We've spent a lot of time at their house with them there, and sometimes without them there. We kept it clean most of the time, but I appreciate you guys having so much trust in us and allowing us to be kids. I also, it's been a pleasure meeting some of his friends from Appfolio, also his extended family. In that experience, I've definitely noticed how Steve has become to be the person that he is, so warm-hearted, and he shares a great family, so it's been a pleasure meeting all of you, and I respect each and every one of you. Thank you so much. My name is Matt Lutz. I moved here when I was in 8th grade, and that's when I first met Steve. Goleta Valley. It was until Dos Pueblos that we started really becoming friends. I was blessed to have grown my friendship with Steve along with a group of like-minded kids right next to me. And still to this day, they're the best friends I've ever had. And I find myself saying best friend, you know, I had this best friend at this stage of my life, and later on I had another best friend, but sometimes when I put that label on people, it just doesn't last. Somehow this crew right here is the only ones that last through the test of time. So it's nice to be standing here with them today. We did everything together, mostly eating. We played a lot of poker, occasional troublemaking. I won't get into detail about that. This is for a different day. This is where the concept of friends and family began to grow with me. I never understood when people would say, this is family, even though they weren't immediate family, but I'm starting to understand how that's possible. It really does feel like a family member is gone. As many 15 to 16-year-old kids, we were quick to spend more time together than we did with our own immediate families. I noticed that we all shared a common link. We were introverted, and learning how to become it. I'm still working on that part. Many of us have kind of reached that chasm quicker than others, and a lot of them are men next to me, and it's been a pleasure to watch you guys grow. What was unique about Steve was he liked to speak, whether it's appropriate or not. And that's where we gained our much-needed extrovert of the group. Steve had a special ability to make us laugh so hard it hurt my stomach. Never knew that was even possible until I met him. But when I think back of all the memories, I often remember the physical pain of laughter we all experienced together. It's a good pain, though. It is the most cathartic and enriching feeling I've ever felt. I'd like to share a memory with you that comes to mind when I think of Steve. Oftentimes we gather as a group before heading to a party. This is back in the high school days. Well, in classic Steve fashion, he always got the great idea to do a rap battle with someone in the group. A lot of times Joe was the victim. I say victim because these rhymes were vicious. Anyways, Steve was so quick to come up with the most witty, hilarious, and just vulgar freestyles our group has ever heard. Causing all of us to erupt in laughter, which would make Steve have to rap even louder to drown out our laughter. You can see the irritation too. Which then only made us laugh more. And that quickly made him laugh, which made us laugh harder. And that cycle continued until we were all rolling on the ground, shouting mercy because our abs hurt so much from laughing. It was some of the best moments of my life, and I still cherish them to this day. He's a beam of sunshine, and everywhere he went, he shared that warm heart that we've all come to know with everyone. I aspire to be more like him as I grow up, especially that warm heart that he had. I hope I can channel that and grow more like he was. These past few weeks have been taught me to prioritize family and most importantly express love and gratitude to everyone in my life that has shared the same sentiment with me. Communicating with my friends and family no longer comes second to my work schedule or day-to-day errands. Steve lived his entire life sharing compassion and love for all, and I always admired that quality of him. And in a way, despite crying more in the past couple of weeks than I ever have, I'm entering the happiest and most rewarding chapter of my life because of this gift he's given me, a reorganization of my priorities and a new approach to life. I vow to never stray from this newfound path that Steve has forged for me, and I love you, Steve. I will always carry you in my heart wherever I go. And thank you to everyone again for being here. Appreciate it, everyone. Thank you so much.
my fellow coworkers at Folio. We're going to start with Caitlin Surek.
I had the pleasure of working with Stephen at Folio, like many of us here today. In my first few years at the company, I worked closer with Stephen's brother Mike on our services team in Santa Barbara, while Stephen was in Dallas on the sales team. As I learned the lay of the land in my first real job, it was quickly apparent that the Gordon brothers were the guys to know. Mike G, as he was known, was the services hero with his deep product expertise, and Stephen was our connection into the weird world of sales, and a reliable source for Dallas gossip. To the rest of us young 20-something-year-olds, they had it all. The answer to any question, personal connections with the executive team, and this impressive ability to get work done, all with a remarkable touch of wit. They both were so welcoming, hardworking, and dedicated to the company, and it inspired the rest of us to be the same. During those first few years, Stephen would check in with me from Dallas every so often to jokingly ask if Mike G was working hard, since someone had to keep an eye on that guy. He would always end the conversation by saying, fully unprovoked, "You know Mike G's the cooler brother, right?" He was always so proud of you, Mike. Over the years, my relationship with the Gordon brothers switched as Mike moved to sales and Stephen to services, and then out to Santa Barbara. Stephen was now my go-to Gordon brother, and he effortlessly filled Mike's previous role of providing me with witty banter amongst the serious business talk. I loved working with Stephen. I could always rely on him for a momentary escape from the challenging work days by provoking him with a purposely selected topic on the government or religion or just general society. Like the time we debated if country music is real music, or whether homeless people deserve to live on an island together far, far away. We're both competitive and the type to openly welcome a challenge, so our banter would escalate down a rabbit hole while we eagerly waited to see who would take it just one comment too far, before laughing and quickly snapping back into our mature, responsible business demeanor. We could easily answer all of the world's questions all before the start of a business meeting. That was my favorite thing about Stephen. He was such a credible and dedicated leader without ever sacrificing or hiding his true self. We all knew he had strong opinions on certain topics, but he never brought that into the workplace in a pushy way. It gave him depth and reminded you that we're all humans with a deeper story than just our world at work. I was always impressed with his ability to have fun while being respectful and respected at work. A few years ago at a leadership offsite dinner, we convinced Stephen to freestyle rap in front of all of our bosses. And to our delight, he agreed. He opened and warmed up with a few yo-yos. And then, considering his audience, thoughtfully replaced any cuss words with a ch sound. There was a lot of ch in that rap. And he told us he meant to keep it work appropriate. He was so proud to work at such a great company and never took it for granted. We talked about how we'd both work at Folio forever since the company's on track for world domination, and I promised to hire him as my assistant once I was on the top. His dedication was inspiring to all of us. He was so intelligent, always thinking bigger, questioning how he could improve, and welcoming of others' input without being afraid to challenge those ideas and make us all better. He showed me that you could work hard without taking life too seriously, and that as long as you're a genuinely kind person, you should never be afraid to be your true self. Stephen became the Dr. Dre to my Eminem, in both the literal sense as karaoke partners, but also as the type of friend who has your back with no questions asked. As karaoke partner, Stephen was awful. He would steal my lines, mess up the words, and always refuse to accept when I fired him from our future acts. Our song, Forgot About Dre, includes 18 F-bombs, amongst many other derogatory phrases, and somehow we were always performing this to an audience of Folio peers, direct reports, and unfortunate new hires. When I would voice my concern over the optics of two leaders rapping at a company happy hour, Stephen would instantly reassure me that our song was actually pretty mellow for gangster rap. Remind me that rap is a form of poetry, and then push it over the top by telling me if I did it, people would think I was a cool boss. It was always impossible to say no to his mischievous grin. As Dr. Dre and Eminem, we were in it together, and it always felt safe to push the boundaries with Stephen by my side. As friends, Stephen's beliefs and sense of humor demanded a certain level of intelligence that challenged you to be smarter. He had strong views because he had done the research and thought it through, and he expected the same level of prep from you if you really wanted to get into it. He was so naturally funny and eager to entertain. He felt special if you were in on his jokes, and even more special if you could impress him with your wit. I loved when Stephen had a funny story to tell because he could never even get out the words over his own wheezy giggles. Always motivated to make him laugh back, I would have to over-dramatize every detail in a story until he would smile, and then really drag it out until he could no longer hold in his wheezy, full-body belly laugh. It was such an accomplishment to make him laugh, and I'll miss that contagious, wheezy giggle. Underneath his gangster rap and tattoos, Stephen was a sensitive and genuinely kind person. In our childish way of arguing with each other, if ever I had thrown the towel until he took it too far, he was quick to apologize. Once I had long forgotten about the topic, to my surprise, he'd be reaching out again to apologize, explaining he really didn't mean it, and ask if we were okay. He was always unsettled by personal conflict and eager to resolve it, which to me showed his true care and respect for our friendship. Stephen, I know you didn't believe in heaven, but I can't help but smile at the thought of God welcoming you with open arms to the pearly gates, picturing your face in a shocked and amused smirk going, no effing way. Wherever you are, I want you to know that we miss you. I'm so heartbroken, sad, and angry, but I know my anger is selfish because my life will now be less without you in it. I will no longer get the benefit of your friendship, the ego stroke of making you laugh, the humorous relief at a boring business meeting, or the contagious effect of your wheezy giggle. But I know how unsettled you were by upsetting a friend, so I hope you know that just like always, I know you didn't mean it, and yes, we're okay. My G's got in and out, but I'll still check on him to make sure he's working hard. And I promise to keep showing the young kids just how cool I am with offensive rap songs. I'll miss you as my karaoke partner and partner in crime, and I promise I'll never let anyone forget about Jay. Rest in peace.
I'll now welcome Beth Gilbert.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here today to share a few words with you all about Steve. I loved working with him. Today actually marks my 6th year at Folio. When I first started, Steve was in our Dallas office, and I didn't get a chance to work with him till probably about a year or so into my time there. I was working on a project and I needed to have a connection with the team out in Dallas to make sure that they were training properly, and Steve was my guy. And I immediately realized, I love this guy. There's something about him, the way he works, that's really, really good. There's actually a lot of qualities and characteristics that Steve has that remind me of myself, and I think that's why we connected right away. We have the same work ethic. We are accountable, and that's what I needed in this project. He had my back, and I had his back. The last 7 months, we actually got to work a lot closer together when I took on a new role at Folio. He was actually part of my core team. We were doing big things. He was the bright spot of my day. We were dreaming big together. We had all the ideas, and I remember the first time I actually had a meeting with him about some of the work that we were doing, and I saw the spark in his eye when he realized that I was going to let him dream big, that we were really going to do some good things, and he was like, oh, I can think outside the box, all right. We had so many plans for this year, and I don't think I could talk about how excited I was about the work that we had to come without mentioning Steve's name. I spent some time thinking about the qualities I love most about him and what drew me to him every day and made every moment with him so special. The one that always comes to mind first is his passion. When Steve believed in something, whether it was something that wasn't working, and man, if that was the case, you better watch out, or something he wanted to impact, he was in it 100%. And he would find anyone that he can find that would help make sure he made that change. I ended up being that person for him, one of the people for him in the last 7 months. One of the first projects I got when I first got in my role was one of Steve's projects. He came to me, sat me down, and told me about this issue we were having and the problems we were facing, and I was like, okay, let's go, let's figure this out. And we did. And he made sure I had everything I needed to make sure we were able to solve it, and we ended up solving it. He was compassionate, a partner, a dreamer, a leader. He was genuine, trustworthy, and accountable. He helped us be better as a company and as individuals. He taught us how to walk in the right direction. He taught us persistence. He would say to me now and then, let me know if I'm coming out too strong in these meetings. He's like, we leave meetings and he'd Beth, please let me know if it was too much. And I was like, no, bring it. I love the passion, you need it. He was my partner in crime. We've been working on reimagining how we were going to deliver service and how we could think differently about the work that we were doing. There wasn't a week or even a couple days that went by where there wouldn't be one of us messaging each other going, you got a sec? Or he'd walk by my office and kind of peer in and see if I was busy and stop by. We would bounce ideas off each other, and you can just see the excitement growing inside him. I gave him permission to think big, and not to worry about the boundaries that we would have to face eventually, but to just think about all the things that we could do. Steve embodied the best of our values. Steve, your vision has become my compass. I will honor your legacy, your passion, and your dream of us being the best. I miss you every day, and I love you. Thank you.
Now hear from Chad Brooks.
First, just want to thank the Gordon family for asking me to speak, and very honored to be up here on behalf of Steve. Steve and I work very close at Appfolio in the Client Services Department. When a client would come out of sales, our largest client would go through Steve's team for onboarding and then come to my team for client service. With the stress and pressure of handling our largest clients' expectations and guiding their business, Steve and I knew we needed to interject some humor and some levity into the people in our teams that are managing these clients. Steve and I never had to discuss this. It was almost just tacitly understood that that was the way we were going to operate, and it worked great. Outside of the office, Steve and I were friends. If we were lucky, once a month we would get together over an old-fashioned and reciting tales of our most colorful customers and debating our favorite bands and stand-up comedians. He's a great conversationalist. Whenever I'd walk up to Steve's pod on the second floor where he sat, he always had an amusing greeting for me. It would be along the lines of, Chatterson, or C-Money, or his newest quip, which he would say to his team, hey everyone, it's the Cadillac. The Chad of Cadillacs. One memory that comes to mind, probably 80% of the meetings that I was in, Steve was in with me. Early 2019, we were in a leadership meeting discussing headcount, promotions, movement throughout the client services department. And I was giving my review of an employee, and I used the word comportment, basically their demeanor, the way they carry themselves. As we exited that meeting, Steve had a huge grin, tongue in his cheek, and he comes up to me and he goes, comportment? Really, Chad? Comportment? That's classic. So over the next 3 weeks, every meeting I was in with Steve, he would try to use comportment. Whether it was contextually right or not, he would slide that in and lean over at me. So, fast forward a few months, and we were in a meeting in the Las Palmas conference room. I know there's a lot of Appfolians in here. Conference room on our second floor, where there's a whiteboard in the room, but only if you're sitting at the table, only about half the people can see that whiteboard. I happened to get into the room early. I was the first one there, and the whiteboard was empty, or blank. I basically went up and I just wrote in dry erase marker, top 3 threats to Appfolio for 2019. And I wrote number 1, our churn budget. Number 2, misaligned client expectations. And number 3, Steve Gordon's comportment. Yep. So we had some executive leaders in that meeting, so it was kind of towing the line, but a well-played joke, and the room started to fill, and Steve was actually about 5 minutes late, so there was only 1 chair left. He was sitting right across from me, my back was to the dry erase board. And so he's trying to gather his thoughts, get up to speed on what's being presented in the slideshow, And then about 15 minutes in, his head shifts over my direction. And then his eyes roll up to the whiteboard, and he reads the first one. I can see the wheels starting to turn. He reads the second bullet, and then he reads the third bullet, and he just starts convulsing. This like ticklish polar bear. I think even to the point where whoever was talking was like, Stevie, you're good? You all right? His eyes were squinting. Yeah, I'm good. I'm sorry, I'm good. So as we exited that meeting, he threw his big old meat hook arm around my shoulder, and he was like, dude, that was too much. That was classic. Everything was above board with Steve Gordon. He was incapable of being deceitful. I love that about Steve. Even if he tried, his constitution would not allow him to speak out of both sides of his mouth. That told me more about his integrity than a resume ever could. That level of authenticity is rare this day and age. Steve was the only colleague I had that could stretch a 10-second question into 5 minutes. He would have various asides and counterpoints, and while he wasn't being intentionally discursive, he was just thoroughly enjoyed thought-provoking discourse. He loved to debate, as many have already said today. I always needled Steve that his next tattoo needed to read, to make a long story short, ... I sat next to Steve in countless executive dinners, some of the best restaurants in this town, and as Caitlin alluded to, inevitably dessert would be served, and those of us who knew Steve best would cajole him to lay down a rap, freestyle, and he'd always have this momentary paralysis of like, oh, I can do that, but he'd take stock of all the new leaders at the table. Maybe it was their first year at Folio, and he tried to play it off humble, like, no, that was a one-time thing. But inevitably, a beatbox would come in, Steve would have his bass line, and he couldn't help himself. We all know that sheepish Cheshire grin of Steve Gordon that would just leak out of his mouth. You know, he was our own Ivory Biggie Smalls. We loved him. At Appfolio, there is a creed that we do right by our clients. No one embodied that creed like Steve Gordon. He had it coursing through his veins, and he lived it every day. This is a loss for all of us, and this is a seismic loss for our clients because they've lost their most staunch advocate. Apathy to Steve was anathema. It did not compute. Proposing a feature or a quick fix that Steve felt shortchanged our clients turned him into an absolute pit bull. This is exactly who I wanted to be in the trenches with. It didn't matter if Steve was outranked or outflanked. It was never personal, but this was how business got done. He was tenacious in his belief that we could always do better by our clients. You guys may recall that on the inside of Steve's forearm, he had a tattoo that said revolution, and it had the word love emboldened. That's what I'll take from my short time, several years with Steve Gordon. Steve had a big heart. Steve had a pure heart. I hope, Steve, wherever you are, you're at ease and that you're laughing. Thank you.
I'll now welcome Vince Coley, Stephen's longtime manager.
So Steve seriously did all that stuff, Heather? Are you serious? So I should be fired from Appfolio because I was managing Steve for like 5 years and didn't know he was doing any of this stuff. All right, so I have serious things to share, but I'm gonna, because it's totally fine to do, I'm gonna share my favorite Steve story, and super inappropriate and it's fun. So I've been at Appfolio for 10 years, and I've worked with Steve for the full time that Steve was at Appfolio, including being his proud leader for the last 5 years. I'm here today representing the onboarding Wolfpack and all the folks from Dallas who couldn't make it out here today. And when Steve did work in Dallas, I was out there visiting the team, and he had just been promoted to manager for the first time. And he was super excited, and he was super proud of what he had earned. And so we were there and I was on site and we were gonna go take a walk from our office to Urban Eats, which is a place that I like to fancy in Dallas because there isn't an Outback Steakhouse that's nearby there. But so Steve and I start walking across the street and there's like a 4-lane highway that goes by. It's like super quick zipping cars. And so I start racing across the street. Steve's just taking his time. And a truck pulls down and speeds up. And I'm like, Steve, what are you doing? Steve flicks the truck off like this. So, remember, this is our first official one-on-one. The truck swerves, this whole thing happens, and then Steve comes walking up. Now, and then the truck slams on their brakes, and they squeal backwards, and this is when we both sprint. And so we're sprinting through a parking lot of a bank, down the steps into this little cubby area, and we're hiding behind bushes. For some reason, I feel like this story isn't a surprise to anyone in this room. So we had our first one-on-one, hiding behind bushes, down the steps, and I said, Steve, can I give you some feedback? And I think one of the things for me that is really clear, I've really enjoyed listening to everyone say the things that are special about them, the friends and everything else. It's really, really touching. And, you know, the one thing that is unique about Steve and my relationship is that I was his boss. And for some reason, I thought that meant something, like I had some clout, like he would listen to what I would say. Because I swear, I told him not to do the thing, all the things that I told him not to do. I should be fired. So, I flew in from Ohio today, from Cleveland. Boy, was I struggling to pull together the right words to say. I think everything kept falling flat for me. And so what I decided to do was cheat, and I'm going to use Steve's words to describe what he felt about being a leader at AppFolio. So last year, the onboarding team, the managers and I, we all wrote leadership why statements. I got into this whole like touchy-feely why statement, mission statement thing. And so when you create a why statement, it's like a mission statement. And so the whole idea when you do that is you ask big questions. Why am I a leader? How do I want to be remembered as a leader? Steve hated it. Steve absolutely hated the entire process because he wasn't a touchy-feely guy. He just wanted to get in there and make action happen. But I am super happy that Steve threw me a bone and stuck it out because I wanted to share Steve's why statement with you guys. So, how Steve wanted to be remembered as a leader, in his words, to better my organization, my team, and myself, in that order. He loved AppFolio, and he loved the people he worked with. And he appreciated every opportunity he got at AppFolio, and he always felt supported. And there's nothing he loved more than putting his team members in the spotlight to see them make an impact and grow. And so then I sat down and asked Steve to do some more reflection and introspection. Those are the things he enjoys doing. But he wrote down, so how am I going to accomplish that? How am I going to live up to that? And this is what Steve said. He said, every day I want to, see if any of this resonates with you guys, play to my strengths, always do the right thing, put my team and peers in a position of ownership, think big, never settle, my team knows I have their backs, initiate forward movement, generate and build momentum, hit goals, be a troll, not listen to Vince, say inappropriate things. I've added those to his why statement. You guys are picking up the theme there, right? Yeah. So what he saw, what he aspired to be as a leader, it's insane. It's all the things that I've been hearing here all day. And I am so proud of the leader that Steve became. And in my mind, it's clear that he realized his leadership why. And the impact he's made on all of us is clearly a lasting one. One of the things Steve and I talked about a lot was this idea of lead like you want to be remembered. I've heard a very similar sentiment from some of his friends, this idea of live your life like you'd like to be remembered. And I think that that's a really strong takeaway even for me as I walk off the stage today. Last thought, the onboarding team will miss Steve dearly. We will not be the same. And similar to what Beth said, we're going to do our best to honor him this year. And we're going to do everything we can to better AppFolio, our team, and ourselves. And we are going to do it with the tenacity and focus and joy of Steve Gordon. Thank you.
Okay, now I'd like to welcome some of Steve's family members. We're going to start with Aunt Jessica.
Stephen made me an aunt. I was 15 when he was born, the same age my son is now. Stephen was and still is, objectively, the most beautiful newborn baby I had ever seen. He was my favorite subject for my darkroom photography throughout high school. I was lucky enough to be the one my mother took when she wanted to travel with my nephews and needed a second pair of hands. I will always treasure my memories of taking Steve, Mike, and Nick to Disney World, and of seeing Israel with Stephen and my mother. But the trip that will stay with me the most is a much later one. Steve came to Disney with my mother, my husband, and I, and my then 3-year-old son, Spencer. My mom called them her bookend grandkids, Stephen the oldest and Spencer the youngest. And they had a special bond. On the drive from my parents' house to Disney World, Stephen split his earbuds with Spence. I have no idea what they were listening to, but it didn't really matter. Some kind of flu was going around at the time, though, and on the morning of our last day there, Stephen woke up feeling sick. But his little buddy had a character breakfast that he was excited about, and Stephen wasn't about to disappoint him. You can look at every single picture from that morning and see in his face just how sick Stephen was feeling, but always with a big grin on his face and Spencer at his side. They were self-named, pretty sure this was Steve's doing, Steenut and Speenut, and would address each other that way ever after. That's who my nephew was. I will miss his sense of humor, his intelligent mind, his love of debate, and our shared enjoyment of tabletop games. But most of all, I will miss getting to see him be an uncle someday. It's a title that I know he would love every bit as much as I loved being his aunt. Thank you.
And now we'll welcome Uncle Keith.
So, I am Uncle Keith. This is Stephen and Mike's Aunt Wendy. Stephen was the first of many things. He was the first grandchild, he was the first nephew, and I'm the first uncle. So a lot of what we learned came from Stephen. It was how we were growing as adults too. Experimentation at Steve's expense sometimes, parenting experiences, you name it. In my almost 60 years being here, I've been referred to a lot of different ways, called a lot of different names, most of which aren't appropriate for here. And as usual, Stephen had a name for me as well, one of my favorites. You used to call me Special K. Over the last several days, since we heard the news, I spent a lot of time, obviously, remembering different things, about his childhood or about the recent years when he was a teenager. And it's kind of weird, the stuff that comes to your mind. You know, some of them are stories that are not appropriate, like some of you talked about, but we all seem to have them. It's like, I don't think there's anybody in here that doesn't have an inappropriate story to Stephen. You know, but you think of different stuff as you're combing through your computer or your phone or whatever, where you have all these pictures stored, things that you've forgotten about, you know, events from when they were little, or even, you know, in the past several years, things where you look at a picture and you go, oh shit, I remember we did that, yeah. And I don't know if you, some of you may know this, but before Stephen was the great AppFolio employee that you guys know, I actually employed him when he didn't have a job, but this was right before he started working for AppFolio. And I had a small manufacturing business and sold seat covers actually to hunters and fishermen. And we did this god-awful trade show in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania in February. So like the worst. It's an awful, I hope nobody's from Harrisburg, but it's an awful place, it's an awful time of year. It's held at the farm show complex, and literally they sell animals there the week before, and then people come in and do this trade show. And it's for 10 days. It's not 10 hours a day, 10 days, nonstop. Stephen, even after he started working for AppFolio, continued to take vacation and come and do the trade show with me. And, you know, in hindsight, I'm thankful for the concentrated time that we got to spend together. Because I got to see how he was, not just as a kid, but what he was growing into. We saw each other at holidays and things like that as well, but obviously you get a different perspective when you're standing in a booth talking to hunters and whatnot for 10 hours a day, every day. You know, in trying to think of different stories, that it was actually hard for me. You know, I have memories from they're in like little buckets of time from when they were little, and you know, Scott and I were first babysitting for Stephen, and he magically ended up upside down on his head in his walker on the stairs and towards the basement because we were busy doing the renovations of the house. We heard him eventually, and he survived, so. You know, the first time being a new uncle, I took Stephen snow sledding. Great morning, spent a lot of time out there with him as a little kid. I neglected to check the snowsuit or you know, change him for hours. My bad. You know, thank God we stopped at my mother's house for lunch, and she was kind enough to change him, but snowsuit, the whole thing, it was a bad parenting or uncling, whatever the right term for that is. I could tell you guys stories of when they were a little bit older, of Stephen chasing my daughter Carrie around the house with an ass hair that he had pulled out and just
Yep.
That's actually very characteristic of the later years too. I can share with you some of the lovely terms and videos and whatnot that both my son Nick and Stephen were kind enough to share with my youngest, who was 10 years younger than him. So that's how he learned most of the foul language that he has today. I could go to the current stuff and tell you about the great holidays that we had together. You know, rifle practice or things like that we did, political debates that he had with everyone, casino trips, which he also seemed to have with everyone. And honestly, it's hard to pick the right story that's the epitome of Stephen, at least from my memory bank that I have. Wendy and I were both fortunate enough to spend some time last weekend with the group you saw before of Stephen's close friends. And they were kind enough to share a bunch of those stories, whether it was the casino trips or things like that. And I spent most of the time there listening to things that I hadn't heard of before, but great stories, that they had of time with Stephen. And in reflecting on the time we spent with Stephen over the years, many of the stories that I heard were just like the ones that I had. They were like my experiences as well. They all shared a similar content. Because Stephen was that same person for all of us. Stephen was very strong-willed. He was a fierce debater. Didn't matter the topic, politics, religion, food, take your pick, it didn't matter. He was incredibly quick-witted, and I'll be damned if he wasn't funny as hell.
Nope.
Once you got past the exterior, Stephen was a lovable guy with a huge heart. He was a terrific brother, not only to Michael, but to all of my kids. Looking back, I feel fortunate to have those memories, and I'll try and focus on those. Because I know for certain that the world was a better place with Stephen in it. And I will miss him and love him always.
Stephen called me Auntie My Wendy, and I always felt really special and important and loved when he did. And that's really the thing about Stephen, in getting to talk to you boys here, that were up here, and listening to everyone from Folio. That was the thing about Stephen, He made everybody feel special. And, these stories are real connections that people had, and that's unusual. And we were all lucky to have that. And both Stephen and Michael are like brothers to our kids and our daughter-in-law. And Stephen, being the oldest, was even a mentor in some ways, though some of what he taught them over the years, I had to get the Urban Dictionary out just to keep up, But we were lucky because we got to have Stephen as the very fabric of our family. And he made us argue with passion, and he challenged our beliefs and sometimes our patience. He made us watch a lot of stuff on Netflix. He made us laugh, and sometimes until we cried. And Stephen brought so much love to the table, and he just, he made our family better. And there's always going to be empty space in our hearts and at our holiday tables and our birthday tables. And I can't imagine a time when, almost everybody here, they're not going to miss him.
cousin Nick.
All right. I grew up with Steve and Mike in Connecticut. Steve was the oldest. Mike and I were born a week apart the following year. Our parents were all friends, kept us extremely close. If my mother or father ever said we're doing something with the cousins, that was Steve and Mike. Keep in mind, I've got a dozen or so cousins on my mother's side of the family, but the cousins are Steve and Mike. Really, we were more like siblings. We laughed like brothers and argued like brothers. Our parents made sure we hung out almost every weekend. Endless meals at IHOP or Tucci's, catching frogs in the pond near their house. Really, anything that kept us seeing each other regularly. As a kid, you really don't think much of these things, but looking back on it, I'm so thankful we had for the years growing up together. Eventually, Steve and Mike would take off for California. We made sure we'd go out and visit over the summers and meet up around New Year's at our grandparents' house in Florida. Even though we were seeing each other much less, we grew up with so many similar interests that we could really just pick up right where we left off. Movies, music, food, you name it, Steve had something for everyone. He was truly such an amazing guy, I just don't know if he realized how awesome he was. Our family's so close, but Steve would go above and beyond. He cared so much about the family and would always make sure to reach out to our grandparents and our aunts and uncles when maybe the rest of our cousins would forget. Looking back, even when I brought my wife to Florida for the first time 12 years ago, Steve immediately treated her like a sister, made her feel like she was already part of the family. He was thrilled to add another kid to the list of people to tease. Steve was smart and loved to make people laugh, well-spoken but not afraid to be vulgar, open-minded but convicted in his opinions, busy but never too busy to drop everything and come help someone he loved or cared about. Steve had this type of balance perfected. There's not another person in the world I know like Steve. He'll never be replaced. Our family will always miss him, and I'm just thankful I got to know him for so long. I love you, Stevie G.
Mikey, you're up.
So, probably like everyone else here, I'm like rewriting this thing a million times every time you guys talk, because there's so many good things I've learned, but I have a thing written here, I'll do my best to stick to it. I want to thank everybody for coming. I want to thank Appfolio for helping us put this all together. Heather, thank you so much for doing a great job. And to everyone who's like shared stories either on stage or just like in the congregation area out there, my parents appreciate it so much. We all do. There we go. So we're really thankful for everything that you guys are here for us, but you're all here for Steve. I think it's pretty clear. And Steve definitely didn't coast through life. You know, he made waves. I think it's clear, you know, the things that we're hearing. And his presence was always known for better or worse. You know, and I think we're all going to feel that something's missing for a long time. I know I will. And I've heard a lot of stories in the last week, old and new, and the one thing I'll say is that every time I hear a new story, it's great, or even an old story, I like thinking about it. So they've been awesome, but there also is a congruency. I mean, you guys have probably heard it with these speeches today in Steve's character, and there's something reassuring in knowing that he was the same person to all of us and that he didn't really hide who he was for anyone. And so I feel like we all really know who he was and what he was like, because he wore his heart on his sleeve. And that's the first story that I want to share with you guys is it's about that. So just out of curiosity, raise your hand if you know that Steve had tattoos. Everybody. Raise your hand if you knew it before the other speeches that mentioned he had tattoos. So, what you may not know is that his first tattoo was misspelled. If you were alive today, I couldn't tell you this story, I promise. It had the word disappear, spelled with 2 S's and 1 P. Which is not how you spell disappear. Recently, he actually went to go get it corrected, and he went to a tattoo artist, and that tattoo artist told him, you know, it would look better if you just left it. It would look worse if I corrected it. And he appreciated that honesty. And so instead, he hired the guy to do his next tattoo. And as Steve's driving home from that session, he looks down at his arm, and the guy misspelled his tattoo. This one he got corrected, but if you ever were to look at it, you notice there's a T that's kind of shimmied in there. It was one of those things where it would happen, and you'd say, this would happen to Steve. Right, one more.
Yeah.
Okay, there's a lot more. How many of you have heard Steve rap? By show of hands. And Mom should really turn around and say it's pretty much Steve. Well, so here's a story you may not know about Steve rapping. I heard him rap too a lot, as you can imagine. We would take trips down south and visit my mom and Colin, or just drives really anywhere we would go, he would rap at some point. It was just gonna happen. And there was a video I found, an old home movie, and it turned out when we were like 10 years old, Steve turned out to be on the vanguard of the rap movement. He took tinfoil and he pressed it against his teeth, and he was insisting that metal teeth, or as we call them today, grills, would be the next big thing. And it's a testament to his style and how forward-thinking he is, so don't be surprised if in 10 years you see people walking around in soccer jerseys and basketball shorts. I honestly thought that this wouldn't have a lot of people, but I am curious. How many of you have been given a nickname by Steven? It's a lot. A surprising number of people. Willingly or unwillingly, he would make a nickname. If he could have a play on words with your name, or if he just did something that only made sense to him, he would definitely come up with a nickname. And there's some cool ones. The Chatillac's pretty dope. Special K I've always been a fan of. But I got the shortchanged a lot in school. He would call me Lovely. And for those of you who have been hanging out with us in the last maybe 5 years or so, Schmiegel was his name. Schmiegs. So that was what he was calling me up until last week. All right, one more. How many of you have had a political debate with Steve? Your chuckles in there. I don't know why, because I think this is where our stories are going to diverge a little bit. When you think of Steve in politics, I imagine you think of him as stubborn, intimidating, and argumentative. And my memory is different. I'm really shy. For those of you who don't know me, I'm not mean, I'm just shy. But because of that, it's really tough for a guy like me, and Steve was always very outgoing. And so when I was 20, there was an election coming up, and just like now, it's like every other conversation seems to be about politics. And I didn't feel like I knew anything about politics. I don't know if I just didn't care about them, or if I just was too dumb to get it, but I felt very insecure about the whole thing. I felt stupid, and I didn't feel like I had a place in any of it. Ironically, I turned to my brother, and I told him, you know, everyone has an opinion, and I just don't, and I don't even know if I know enough to say anything anyway. And he was the expert, you know, so I thought. He takes one look at me and he says, well, I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. And nobody does. And I think the question you should ask yourself is, how do you want the world to work? And then we proceeded to talk about politics in a way that was, he gave me every side of every political issue, unbiased. He did not push his agenda on me. He just said something. He would play, if I said what he was thinking, he would come back and play devil's advocate against his own arguments and say, well, what if you're morally opposed to that? You know, and would do that so that I got an honest feel for who I was and how I felt. And I still shy away from politics, but that was something that I'll always think about when I think about Steven, is that he was a guy that seemed to thrive on making situations uncomfortable. But for me, he made me feel comfortable when I was the most vulnerable. And he helped me make friends when I moved to Dallas. He was there for me when my parents split up. And he would always help me if we asked. And I hope you're all here today because At some point in your lives, he did that for you too. And if you have a story and you think it's stupid or boring or anything it's not, I really want to hear it. I already know that I know my brother front and back, but there's stories that I would love to hear, my family would love to hear them, so please feel free to come find us, and thank you so much for coming. I think he would have hated it, but we're really happy to have you guys here. We're really happy to have him in our lives, and I miss him so much, so thank you guys.
There's a couple of things I feel like I should mention. My nickname was Scott Dog. If he called me on the phone, it wasn't, hey Dad, it was like, yo, Scott Dog. And Beth was Bleth. And what Mike left, the note that he left on is really true. We've heard your stories this week and they're so heartwarming. And they really, validate what we do about Stephen. So it's really nice to hear them. If you want to hear more, if you have them, please seek us out and tell us. I didn't really write about any stories. I figured we'd be hearing them all from you. So I just want to say that, Beth and I want, and the rest of our family, want to let each and every one of you know how grateful we are that you were a part of Stephen's life. This has been an impossibly tough week for us, but your stories about how Stephen touched your lives have been so heartwarming, bringing to light his compassion and wisdom, insight, and especially his desire for outrageous fun, maybe outrageous and inappropriate fun. We're so proud of Steve. He was every bit the man that we hoped he would be. Looking back, we don't know how he did it. He seemed to have seen every movie. I realize this is a little bit repetitive here because these stories validated everything we thought. He seemed to have seen every movie, heard and memorized every song, watched every television series, and somehow still had the capacity to go toe-to-toe with anyone who dared to debate him on politics, philosophy, or religion. It seemed like he lived a 100-hour day when the rest of us were limited to a mere 24. It's so sad that his life was cut short. But, just maybe he found a way to pack 80 or 90 years into his 33. We'll never know. Sorry. It's difficult. Thanks. It's difficult for us to imagine a world without Stephen's challenging. It's difficult for us to imagine a world without Stephen's challenging questions, deep thinking, quick wit, and broad smile. But that is our world now. He was an amazing human being. And we will miss him always. Sorry. Sorry. Love you, Stephen.
Thank you all for coming today to show your support for Stephen's family and for one another as we try and cope with the loss of such a wonderful guy and celebrate the joy that he brought to our lives. We're all so sad that Stephen isn't physically in our lives any longer, but are so fortunate to have gotten to know him, spend time with him, laugh with him, and love him. Thank you.